Against? Abstain? One abstention. So that said, I'd like to move up the presentation of the 3 parking lot options, and as you all know, this is the committee at the last time. Basically, I'm going to pass out the narrative that goes with this. It's a little old. I think everybody might have seen it, but I'm going to pass it out again. As you may recall, there he is. Here.
Sorry, I'm late.
Thank you. As you may recall, when we discussed the parking lot at the last time, the committee, by a very informal consensus, said leave it alone the way it was bid. Didn't want to take any action on it. I have actually pursued this because we do have at least 1 or 2 members who have voiced concern about the cost and the scope of work related to the parking lot. So, talking with Kevin about it and Joe about it, and and looking at the record, we basically boiled things down to 3 particular alternatives. I hesitate to use the word option. One of them is to leave the parking lot as per project plans and specifications, bid documents, and resulting GMP. The other one was the parking lot to be regraded and reconstructed with new precast pavers in lieu of the landscape rain gardens. And then the final one was, I believe, to repair the existing parking lot asphalt and precast pavers, assuming the existing grade, paving, and drainage features would remain for existing. So that's basically leaving it alone. I think that's where we left off. As far as these 3 alternatives, are they consistent with our thinking? Anybody have any questions about that before I ask Shama to talk to us about cost? Because that was the missing element throughout all this, and that is, are there any cost impacts? So, that said, I don't know whether it's Ben, is it you, or is it Brian, or who's going to got the numbers for us here?
We'll have Sean present the Mosaic from their subcontractor, and then we can go through.
Okay.
Kevin can field any design questions, we can talk about what it means.
Hi, Kevin, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Red Sox, get out of here.
So as we're looking at this, Mark or Brian,
So what we've
tell us a little bit about what this means.
what we've done is we've gone through the documents on 2 different options. Option 1 is actually there's no change for the GMP. That option has no impact on cost or schedule because that's what the GMP was based on, and that is basically option number 1 is parking lot reconstruction that Jim passed out here. So that would have no effect on the GMP or our schedule.
That's just a paved lot.
Paved lot.
Regraded paved lot.
Before we go much further, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, to be fair, I think you need to have, you've got costs associated with numbers 2 and 3. There's an obvious cost associated with number 1. I think we need to know what that is.
That's the GMP.
Is the parking lot separated out in the GMP?
In their schedule of values, yeah.
Anybody have that with them tonight? Yeah, if it just, I mean, since we're using a range, it doesn't have to be to the last $5,000.
The town, in the GMP, the town is going to do the structural fill and grading of the lot. And then you were going to
It'd be the asphalt.
You come in and pave.
It's paving and it's,
Drainage?
No,
Drainage
actually,
is by the town.
the 3 catch basins and the associated parking with those basins were to be done by the town.
And Kevin's documented these numbers, and the narrative is one thing, but there were drawings that backed this up. I remember at least two presentations we
Two
had.
alternate site plans, number one and number two.
I
Okay.
have copies of each if you'd like.
I think if we get into it, it might be helpful, but it's up to you. You want to, any members want to see it, it'd be easier to understand this. We had, are they 11 by 17s, or, yeah, okay. You,
I have large drawings.
no, I don't think, I think that was, I was looking for the smaller version. Thank you.
If I may,
Yes.
Mr. Fowler, there's also, I believe, one option that's missing, and that option was to regrade the parking lot, but reconstruct it to look like it looks right now. With the with pavers in the same place that they are.
That's option 3.
Sorry?
Option 3.
No, option 2. That was option 2.
Well, option 2 is a modified version, isn't it? Because it has some of the pavers, not all the pavers?
Option 2 has keeping the pavers around the edge.
Option 2 has to do on Jim's list, is the alternate site plan number one, which is the graded reconstructed that stage in lieu of the landscape ring.
To answer your question, it does not have 100% of the existing pavers, but it does have.
Right, it only has it around the perimeter. So,
No.
No.
Around the perimeter, and it has the island down the
Roughly 11,000 square feet of new pavers.
in which area does it not have? It's currently there?
There's currently a strip in front of where the locker wing was that we weren't planning on replacing.
Okay.
It's at the top of the slope, so my thought from an engineering perspective was it has the least benefit to absorbing water because it's kind of the top of the hill, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that said, so we're looking at the numbers, and I know that there's, as a minimum, there's a paving cost in the GMP, right?
Yeah, so according to the schedule of values that we have from Waters Construction, I think we can too, we're looking around $125,000 to $130,000 of the line items for the paving, binder and top coat.
All right.
The rain garden scope that Shawna has is negligible. I'm looking forward here in the schedule of values, but I don't think it's going to be very much.
That would be the landscaping portion of it?
Yeah, most of it's done by the DPW, but I'm trying to...
Okay. All right. So the question before the committee is, again, we've been assuming that we would go plans and specs, and if plans and specs does not include, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, it includes that all the water sheets off into the rain garden under the plans and specs.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the missing link in the plans and specs is the additional pavers in the parking lot, which would bring the parking lot back to the function that it has today.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
We had an alternate ad in the bid documents for putting the pavers back. What was that number?
$199,000.
And what was that scope?
That scope was the town removing all the pavers, palletizing them, and Waters, our subcontractor, reinstalling them.
All of them?
Correct.
Okay.
Just to point out, one of the reasons why these are such big numbers is it's not just the pavers, there's a whole system underneath them with crushed stone, filtered
Right.
fabric,
Right.
bedding material. So
Right.
it is fairly labor and materials intensive.
Okay. How does the committee wish to proceed? It looks like if we do anything other than option 1, which is no change from the GMP, it'll be a cost to the project. All right?
That's correct.
And the current contingency in the project is?
278,500.
We got answers to it. Yes. Lead us off here.
Thank you. I guess, Joe, to you, the current parking lot design, those pavers and the work that was done underneath the pavers, that was done by the town, I believe, correct?
I'm not sure if it was done by the town forces or a sub. I wasn't here during the construction of it, so offhand, I don't know the specific answer, whether it was actually town forces or town contract.
Okay. For some reason, I'm just going by memory, so I shouldn't. I think it was the town, but I'm not certain. Joe, also to you, would you feel comfortable doing some of this work?
Well, one of the missing pieces to the GMP portion, there was a town portion that the town was going to absorb. Approximately the value of that was approximately $80,000. Half of that would be in expenditures for parts, equipment, and mostly processed gravel. And the other $40,000 is the cost of our equipment, our men, so not indirect cost, but there is a direct cost of $40,000. In going through the scopes of possible alternatives, two alternatives there, we had a conference call to discuss the means and methods and who would do what. One of the things I'm confident we'd be able to similarly do what we did for the GMP, spike out portions of it and assign values to it, take responsibilities for it. On this list, I'm confident whatever needs to be done by our forces can be done, but I haven't done the same exercise for the new options that we did for the one in developing GMP.
Okay.
If I
Thank
may,
you.
the cost of, the cost of leaving the parking lot the way it is impacted by the fact that more work has to be done around the building. In other words, raising the parking lot is built into the final design of the building and the site, and the
Correct.
site work and the ramps and so forth.
That's correct.
So the question we seem to have struggled with 3 or 4 months ago when this started was two priorities. One is raising the parking lot to mitigate the height of the building and gain access. And in raising the parking lot, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, it is raising it about 1.5 feet in the middle, and it's generally neutral on the two ends.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's a swale that's being taken out of the parking lot, in a
Yes.
way. And the design that the building that you're building right now and the site work that you're doing anticipates the building and the contract documents anticipate the regrading of the parking lot.
Correct.
Okay. So the issues that we're struggling with are, number one, the regrading of the parking lot, and then number two, do we add pavers into the parking lot? And if we do add pavers, do we take out the rain gardens and go back to a graded, a raised parking lot? I hate the word because it's not really going up that much, but with or without pavers. If you don't have the pavers, you've got the rain garden as your primary catch for the sheeted water sheeting off that parking lot. And once the rain gardens get full of water, they go into the storm system. Correct, Joe? Once they get overcharged?
Correct. Correct. So whatever doesn't get absorbed into the ground stays on the surface and eventually runs into Fairfield Beach Road and the storm drain system then, or the catch basins on the flanking the rain gardens.
Right.
Can I ask a naive question? From day one, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'll defer to you. Go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
You were here first.
Doesn't matter. My question is naive, so yours may be much more
No, it's-
relevant. Go ahead.
All right, I'll shoot. This may have been covered in a prior meeting, and if it was, I apologize, but is there a reason we need to make this decision now? Because it would seem to me the parking lot, and I don't have the timetable in front of me, would be one of the last things to be done. could we wait until we're substantially completed with the project and see what we have left in contingency at that point, and then make a decision? Is there something that's compelling us to make this decision today, rather than when we're further along with the project?
The schedule right now, we're 5 months into the project.
Mhm.
We're actually running about 3.5 to 4 weeks ahead of schedule.
Right.
Once we get the moving back, that parking lot is opened up. We can jump right into that parking lot and get the work done. So it does have an impact on the schedule. We would really need an answer tonight
Okay.
to maintain our schedule.
If I can just add
Yeah.
to that, so that the biggest difference would be if you go to the design where the lot is kept at the same elevation it is now, because the retaining walls get higher, we have additional ramps. So as soon as the building goes back, these guys are ready to start placing fill and start building retaining walls. The scheme where we just change pavers, take out asphalt, put in pavers, has less of an impact, but it's still going to impact the ability of them to finish the job. The asphalt plants close at a certain time of the fall, usually around Thanksgiving. Landscaping is another thing to keep in mind, that we have kind of a drop dead date when that can be put in the fall, as opposed to having to wait till the spring.
Also keep in mind that the documents that we have, that we developed this estimate on, are really design development documents. Full design for these two alternate site plans has not been developed. That's probably another 2-week period. There's 2 weeks of going out and bidding and getting all the pricing back, firming up the price. So that could take probably 6 to 8 week period.
So long story short, you need to know tonight.
Push it out even further.
Okay.
But to Kevin's point, I believe, is if you made a decision, or you had developed, the committee was confident about regrading the parking lot, the issue of, and to plans and specs, going ahead and wanted to insert or add in the pavers for a belts and suspenders solution, you could do that not a lot later, but later in the process, because,
We're 5 months into the project.
no, I'm just saying, you gotta get the building out of there, we have a little bit more time. It's changing the grade is the problem.
It would seem at first blush like there's plenty of time, but it. when
No,
you
I'm not saying
compare the
plenty,
schedule-
I'm just trying to address,
Right.
Because all
Rob.
that work would have to be done before any asphalt could be laid in the parking lot, because that has to come up to the site
Okay.
station. So it's kind of.
It's not like just cutting them
putting that
in.
Critical path before they can.
it's not just cutting them in after the fact. Okay,
No.
okay. Yes.
With regard to options 2 and 3, are you assuming that the rain gardens are staying, given these numbers on your,
No, that the rain gardens would be, the pavers that are currently in place now for one of the options are where the rain gardens are going.
okay,
And then,
Yeah, options 2 and 3 do not have.
No rains.
no rain.
okay, all right, because I was going to ask if they were, how much would we save if we took them out?
It's either
One or the other, okay. Okay, I think my suggestion is, for whatever it's worth, is that we decide on the regrade first, because I think the main discussion is going to be on the pavers, I think.
Before we get there, is there anything we're not talking about, like drainage and environmental concerns, that would influence this discussion or this decision if we get to it? In other words, one of the things that was brought up at one of our previous meetings was to ensure that we don't flood the neighborhood with runoff. Forget the whole storm thing. We've been through that one. So the question really is containment and not adding to rainwater, stormwater into the system or on Fairfield Beach Road or into the neighborhood. Is there one that works better than the other from an engineering and a practical DPW standpoint?
I recall as part of the site plan, Laura Pooley of my office did some drainage calculations.
Right.
And they were pretty much a wash between the pavers and the rain gardens.
No pun intended.
Now, the rain garden, one of the benefits of rain gardens is that the reason for the plants are not just for drainage. There is some uptake of the nutrients, which do provide some environmental benefits. So the theory, the plants will take up phosphorus, will take up nitrogen, which is better in the plants than into the groundwater table and all that.
Kevin, anything to add with that?
I mean, there's been a lot of issues we've talked about as far as the pavers and practicality of them, the maintenance of them, the ability to actually reuse the ones that are there we talked about, and how much salvage factor there's going to be, and how much new we have to purchase to make up for ones that are broken or can't be taken out. So there's a lot of downsides of the pavers. Certainly, if that's the direction the committee wants to go in,
Right.
we can do either. But I do want to reiterate, we do have a design that does work, and it is what everything so far is based on, schedule-wise and cost-wise.
Okay.
Joe, you guys are fine, DPW's comfortable with maintaining the rain gardens and out years with overgrowth and all that sort of stuff to make sure they can still perform? Okay.
Does the town have experience with this type of drainage system?
I've had it in other towns.
Do they work?
Yeah. Well, once again, especially in an environment such as the beach where you have porous soil there. So once, it doesn't take much to open up the ground before it gets into there. And I've seen it in, the Shoreline East train station in Branford, the equivalent of Metcalfe. They have rain gardens all around it. You can't find the catch basin anywhere there. It's probably at elevation 14, and once again, it goes in there, it leaks like a sieve, so to speak. It's very porous pavement, very porous material in that area there. So once you introduce it into the ground, it goes down pretty good.
What's the material in that particular area of the site, Kevin? Is it sandy, or is it pre-draining, so to speak, as the term goes?
Every place we've excavated into the subsoil, it's all sand. And the water table is pretty consistent, it's tidal. It's somewhere around elevation 0 to 2, depending on the tide.
Would we be adding anything to the existing storm drainage system? And as far as runoff?
As far as structures or?
No, as far as capacity. In other words, did the rain gardens add more water to the storm drainage system? They must after a while. Do they have unlimited capacity?
That's more of a function of the surface they're receiving runoff from, so that's really dictated by the size of the parking lot.
Are these rain gardens large? I know they're big, but compared to, they're designed to meet the runoff from the parking lot?
They are. We were somewhat limited in how big we make them, because
You wanna
to fit in
maintain
the parking
parking.
we have now,
Yeah.
we only have so much room left over, even with restriping the spaces to be more efficient.
Does the elimination of the rain gardens add parking spaces?
I guess it depends how you look at it.
It's kind of a funny parking lot where you can't double.
Not really, because I mean, it's not really the best layout right now. It's kind of segmented, and you have angled spaces, which are inherently less efficient than straight space or
Yeah.
perpendicular spaces. I don't really think there's much of a parking benefit no matter what we do.
Okay.
I think the biggest benefit is the fact that we have a parking lot that doesn't have this berm coming out from the building.
Yeah.
And we've captured that area. But as far as these three different options,
Neutral.
they're all fairly neutral.
Okay.
And what about the maintenance on the pavers? Because we heard a lot at previous discussion about pavers, that they work, but then they get clogged, they have to be maintained. So compared to the basins, which is a less maintenance issue for you?
And, well, I think, I don't think there's much maintenance with the open grid pavers. But theoretically, as there's probably as much open area as there is concrete grid. So theoretically, those spaces which are filled now, the things that'll fill them in will be fine sand. And eventually, it's almost like a filter with a vacuum cleaner where when the fine sand gets bunched up too much, eventually it won't be porous. So in theory, you're supposed to vacuum it out every so often and replace it with, so you don't get the material bound up on the surface. But, either way, I wouldn't say that's a big, I wouldn't say that would be a big maintenance responsibility.
But it is on the beach, and the sand's going to get there.
Correct, but one thing, the sand has to bind up pretty good to make a impermeable layer.
Right now,
Two cents in now?
Yeah, I was going to go, excuse me, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, right now, the surface is pretty choked with sand, and it's fairly well packed. The water does still drain, probably not as quickly as it used to, because when they were first put in, there's basically pea gravel in the voids, and now it's a mixture of pea gravel and sand. It's kind of got packed in there.
Yes, thank
If
you.
I read option 2 and 3 correctly, you're asking us to incur additional costs.
We're asking ourselves, but go
We're
ahead.
asking ourselves to incur additional costs, and from day one, my concern was the contingencies. You actually took a thing like that. It would seem to me for us now to approve additional expenditures without any assurance that the money will be there at the end, I think is somewhat irresponsible. I mean, I agree with you. I was going to ask, my reason I said it was naive is because when I watch houses being built, the last thing they put in is the driveway. And I realize a driveway in a house is different here. I would like someone to tell me how we can consider spending anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 and be assured that we can build this project and not go over budget.
It's not.
Because to discuss spending the money, to me, is irresponsible at this point, irrespective of which is the better way to do it. I don't know if we have the money. I'd like someone to assure me that we have the resources, we can take money out of someplace else and come in the end. Because very clearly, we said from day one, this project will be built within budget. We're not going to go back and tell the town that we couldn't build it on time. So without getting melodramatic, is I don't understand if we have any choice. It would seem to me, unless we're talking about spending additional money. Good, bad, or indifferent, the only choice we have is one, unless someone can tell me I'm completely missing it, and I would like to apologize if I am.
I think I can help you with that. If you just care to follow along with me. The built-in cost, the inherent cost in the project for paving is between $125,000 and $130,000. So you offset the $125,000 to $130,000 to the, let's just take option 3, which is $165,000 to $190,000. You have a delta of between $40,000 and $60,000. So it's no longer,
Those are ads.
Those are
Unfortunately, it's not the way they built it, I don't think.
This number represents whatever that
The
net
credit.
was, the credit and everything.
And the
So
ads.
this would be an additional cost to the GMP.
well, I just asked the question earlier, and the numbers that you gave me were $125,000 to $130,000 for paving the parking lot.
That's included.
So if you
Yeah,
don't,
that's included.
That's
so
included.
if you don't pave the parking lot, you subtract out $120,000, and if you go with option number 3, you spend $165,000 to $190,000. You don't spend the $125,000 to $130,000.
The credit's already figured in.
The credit's already figured into these numbers.
What numbers?
The 175 to 200 and 165 to 190.
So basically, it's not, it's.
It's an ad.
It's an ad.
You're right. It's an ad.
300
How can-
to 400.
I mean, I don't know the virtues of rain guards, of pavers, or something like that, although I have some personal feeling. My one thing that I committed to myself, and I committed to the RTM, that we would try to build this project on budget without having to go back. And it would seem to me to entertain spending additional money without assurance that we can complete the project. If we were all done and we're just dealing with the parking lot, I feel much better if you came back and told me we have the money to spend. But I think we're going to be over budget if anything goes wrong. And I don't know how tonight we can prove this. Regardless of the virtues of either way.
Rob?
I agree wholeheartedly with David. I think that you're talking about adding money to a budget where we're already dealing with a very slender contingency, and things have been going well so far, but who knows what'll happen weeks or months from now. I don't think that we have a choice. I think we got to keep with the plan that we have, and since there's really no option to make this decision down the line from what we're hearing, I would agree with my colleague, Mr. Zief, that it's got to be option 1 to keep this thing under budget. That's my 2 cents.
Ellery?
Pass.
I have zero confidence in the numbers that you guys just threw out. I am vehemently opposed to option number one. If we wanted the parking lot to look like Stop and Shop, we would have built a pavilion over at Stop and Shop. The neighbors have been here. The RTM representative from the beach area has been here and voiced concern on behalf of the neighbors who want it to look like it does now. And I don't have any confidence in these numbers right now. So I would vote for option 3, and I don't think it's going to cost any more. I believe the town did it last time. I believe the town can do it again, and I think that's the route we should take. And I would add that in the economic climate that we're in right now, to waste several $100,000 of work that the town has already put into that parking lot, which, by the way, and I want to go on record and say this and be very clear, has survived 2 hurricanes, Irene and Sandy, one of which, Sandy, was the worst flooding we've seen in the 20 or 30 years that I've been living down there. And that parking lot stayed intact. And I think to make any changes to that parking lot would be an absolute waste of time, effort, and money, and it would be a disservice to the residents who pay taxes in this town.
Thank you. You ready?
Again, the only thing I could say is, I will reverse my position if my line colleague is right that these numbers are bogus. I mean, if the numbers are correct, I think I have no choice. If you're right and these numbers can be fixed, then I might change my position. Well, my only concern is not spending money that we don't have.
Yes.
I just haven't heard a compelling argument that doing option 2 or 3 is going to give us, you know, 100,000 plus benefit with the change. So I'm sort of with you in that if the numbers are wrong and it's a $40,000 question, then we can discuss it. But right now, you know, I don't see a benefit of spending $175,000 to, you know, $165,000, et cetera, to make a change to what we've already approved.
Andy?
I don't see the value in spending $1 extra. Stormwater-wise, it's a wash. If we're getting down to aesthetics, that's one thing, but we already had the aesthetics discussion about the design. So you know, even to your point, Rob, about waiting the timeline, I still don't. Even though we might have the budget later in the project, that's still dollars. I mean, that's still $150,000 to $200,000 when it's all done. If we can come back and say, you know, we return money under budget, that's great. I don't have any reason to doubt that these numbers are going to completely go away, like which is what some of my colleagues, one of Ian stated, that this is going to be a wash. If the town does this, it's still we're already paying $80,000 for the DPW to do work. The best case scenario, I don't even know what the town is, but it still incurs a cost to the taxpayers. So I see no compelling reason to go outside of option 1 and to stick with the GMP.
If I jump in?
Yeah.
These papers were put in by the first building committee at the very end. The building, I think, was just about done, and I'm a little apprehensive as to why we have to decide this tonight. I don't know if we will have another meeting before the parking lot is started, but we had extra money because we got a grant, the state gave a grant, so we had extra money and we chose to put in the pavers. Everybody liked the pavers. They liked the way they looked, and I guess for the occasional high heel that got stuck in them. But other than that, all we heard were positive things about it, and apparently the neighborhood was pleased about it also in terms of their functionality. So I would like to do whatever we can to keep them, and I think it's a good thing for the project. It's an iconic building, and to be greeted with, other than just blacktop in the parking lot, is just a nice thing. Plus it has the functionality aspect to it. If there's any way for this committee to meet and determine where we are in the budget in terms of the dollars as we approach the end before you start work on the parking lot, that's what I would like to see. If we, at that point, we'll either have the money or we won't. And that's, I'm hoping maybe we could revisit that in terms of the timeline and when we're going to meet. I have to disagree with Ian on option number 3. I heard the discussions about the grading of the parking lot. I'm not prepared to have longer ramps going into the building and all that other stuff, so I'd be looking at option number 2.
Thank you. Just to square away the question of the numbers, how were these numbers developed?
We went out to subcontractors on the project, asked for their review of the plans and their best estimate for the work that was shown.
What did they see? Did they see these documents?
Those, yeah, just those site plans.
And you were guided by the narrative in these documents
Yes.
as far as, have you taken into account the town's contribution in each one of these cases? In other words, is Joe, you been involved in any of this?
Not in their pricing, and, the exercise of, we'll get to the JMP has not been done by placing a value on our end of it for the other 2 options.
But do you know you obviously know from,
Well, these prices still include the town doing
that's
their
what's going to be the
work.
answer to my
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Kevin, or Shawmut said team, alternate plan with raised parking lot with pavers. There's 2 islands of pavers on this plan, and I don't know how to identify it any other way. There's 2, I don't know which document is which, but I guess we call it ASP1. Recognize that? Do we know what would happen if the committee
This is 2.
simply
Oh,
There's another one.
wanted to insert those 2 islands into the GMP?
So keep the current design with the raised all asphalt parking lot and rain gardens, except carve out those 2 islands. and place
Put the pavers back in the middle of the parking lot to break the asphalt and the look and,
You would still be looking at an upcharge and some schedule impact. It would not be as big an upcharge as.
but there's
It'd
at
probably
least,
still be close, because you're talking roughly 11,000 square feet of new pavers in that area. You're still talking over $100,000.
Oh, that's right, because we were keeping existing pavers for the rest of it.
Exactly.
But yeah,
That's
Joe,
one
I
thing.
think the only thing with that is, coming back to timing, if you're going to, correct me if I'm wrong, means and methods, they're going to pay this entire lot as all one pavement.
Yeah,
If
so
you're going to cut this after the fact,
Right.
it's down the road where if you do have to keep going back to your question, at that point, if everything's paid, we'll probably have a higher level of comfort, not only with your owner contingency, if we're getting towards the end, there might, I don't want to say there's going to be a return from CM contingency, but there might be. But at that point, you're going to have a better idea of what you have left, because you're going to pave it, and if you're saw cutting this out and putting puzzle pieces back in,
thank you, when are you, no, yada, 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 when are you going to pave, roughly? October? You're going to pave before the plants close, you think, you
Yeah, so
hope?
we're trying to get the paving in.
I mean, I could look at the schedule, maybe
Yeah.
you should.
No, we
No,
we have that. We knew, the original schedule shows paving the end of October, October
Yeah.
20th through the 24th. Right now, we're 3.5 to 4 weeks ahead of schedule. We could probably pave by the end of September.
So what's the difference? Nobody's at the beach then anyway. I mean, so what if we go an extra couple of weeks?
No, they're, right.
I don't see that as a factor at all. If you're talking May or June, where people wouldn't be able to use the beach or the pavilion at the beach, I can see that being an issue.
There's a whole process before, if we don't get a decision tonight, there's a 6 to, I'm saying, 8-week process of design, approval, and then getting it out to the subcontractors to get them mobilized, that you're adding into this, because these documents aren't ready to be priced and set up a change order for. There's still a lot of design that has to happen. These are design development plans.
Kevin, we have a GMP, we have plans and specs, which this committee has voted on, and it's where we are. If the committee decided as an alternate to the plans and specs to add these 2 islands, I can't think of any other better description for them, of pavers on ASP 1. What does that require? Is it just a layout issue? I mean, what the pavers are the pavers. You buy them so much a paver and you install them, and yeah, I've heard about the whole crushed stone thing, but it doesn't have to be the, World Trade
Okay.
Center.
So, I mean, the sequence is, now, there's mention made of cutting them in later. I mean, really, you want to have those in first
Right.
and pave
Pave
around
against
them.
it.
So you have to trench down those 2 islands, just fill with batter, crushed stone, set the pavers, which is kind of a hand-setting process and a setting bed of stone dust, fill in the voids, and have all that done before they can pave.
Mhm.
So if they're ready to pave in the end of September, I don't see that happening without pushing that date back.
Joe,
I mean, the one thing to keep in mind, I'm not trying to play scare tactics, but if a trades contractor is ready to do work on a certain day and you tell them, no, you have to wait another month because of X, Y, Z, they're entitled to delay claims. And that's something to think about.
Joe, or Kevin, anybody, you've seen the pavers get dug up. Somebody has, because you've gone through them more than 2 or 3 places.
Yes.
They're not there anymore. Did you find crushed stone, filter fabric, and this elaborate drainage system under them?
Sure did. A surprisingly thick bed of crushed stone, like 1.25 inch stone, filter fabric around it. Yes, we did find that.
And nobody has any idea, an order of magnitude, of what the inclusion of these 2 islands would be.
You just said $100,000.
I'd say, yeah, because you're talking about close to 11,000 square feet, so. No, that's new pavers. That's not reusing it, that was the pavers.
So there's 11,000 square feet, $100,000, that's $10 a square foot.
Right.
So what does the asphalt cost you in place per square foot?
It would be very minimal because they still have asphalt work to do even if the pavers go in. You're
What
taking
the-
away,
It's more of a
On a
material,
square- on a
a
square foot.
material
there'd be a
credit.
material credit for
Per
asphalt.
ton,
$8,000.
all they'd give you, Joe, I think, you know more about this than I do, because you're dealing with it every day, but they just give you a per ton credit.
I don't
Not
think
an
much
applied
more than
credit.
20 or 25 grand. That's $2 a square foot, that's about $18 a square yard. I think that's probably close.
That's the difference
Yeah.
is the asphalt cost you $2 a square foot, it costs you
Right.
So
10 or 11.
there's a position here that we just simply proceed with the project the way it's been bid and the what's in the GMP and the scope of work. And there's an alternative position, which is we delay, but with specific instructions regarding that delay. In other words, we're not going to go through this again. So I'd be happy to just, if we can kind of get this in concept, you would take the existing plan and you'd add pavers in the middle of the parking lot. That's an option for this committee. Looks like $100,000. So you have these 2, we're kind of down, just trying to pull things together. We have 2 ideas here on the table. Yes?
Excuse me, would it be a benefit to poll the committee to see if anybody is just plain opposed to the pavers?
That's why I was
regardless
going, yeah,
of the
that's why I was
money?
going with
Because-
the 2 alternatives.
Okay.
One way to do it, Bob, guide me on this one, one way to do it is just throw a motion out here and get a vote on it, or the other way would be to informally poll the committee.
I think what would make sense is because you're dealing with an existing condition of what we already have approved, you could do one of 2 things. You could informally poll the committee to see if there is a desire to change it. And if there is a change to be made, then you can make a specific motion to change what has already been approved. If we poll the committee and the majority decides that we don't want to change what we have already approved, then that's it. There's no further action to be taken.
Well, if nobody has any particular objection to that, that seems like the most neutral, easy first shot at it. I'm not going to start with you, I'm going to look.
We go in reverse
I can
order.
only say that when I came on this committee in the middle of the process, Mike Tetro, the first selectman, asked me to come on. It was not for my good looks, it's not my building. My assumption was, he thought that as a good bean counter, I could watch the money. And my intention is, through the whole process, is to watch the money. And the only thing I can say is, I don't think I can vote to spend any additional money until we have assurance it's there to spend. I don't know how any clearer I could be. I wish I knew the answer.
So Rob, the polling the committee under these under this situation would be no change?
I would say either no change, yeah,
No change.
no change, yea or nay.
We'll start with you.
No change.
Change. I think it would be equally a problem if we did have money at the end of the day, but it was too late to change course. And that's a concern of mine, equally to David's concern.
Right?
I vote for change, and to address my esteemed colleagues' remarks about coming on the committee later on in the cycle and watching the money, which I certainly understand what the cycle that you came in on late in the game. There was a lot of time before that period of time, and this committee had taken a project that at first blush was going to cost about $2.4 million and ran it up to wherever we are now at $7.4 million, with a net cost to the town of close to $2 million. So I'm a little bit less sensitive to what you were brought in on, because I've seen it expand and explode way beyond what I thought it was ever going to be or ever should be in terms of expense. And not to repeat myself again, but I think that we've done a very poor job as a committee of being sensitive to the surrounding area and the neighbors, and then this is one that they've voiced their concern on. So I vote for change.
For the record, I'm a neighbor, but I think under the circumstances, if these are good numbers, I have to vote for no change.
We already voted on this and had a ton of discussions, and at the end of the day, if we have money left, I believe we should give it back to the taxpayers and not spend it. If it's the neighbors are upset about the aesthetics, then maybe these rain gardens can help with that, but I haven't heard anything that says we're gonna get some sort of benefit for any dollar spent. If we're gonna improve the drainage and stop flooding in the neighborhood, if we spent X, great, but we're not saying that.
Thank you,
So
Phil.
I say no change.
No change. I said that piece.
So you have two change in the balance of the committee, no change.
That's it, we're done. No action needs to be taken.
All right, you're not gonna, you don't think you would take us to a vote?
I don't think it's necessary because you're just essentially affirming what's already been approved.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the input. Stand by for any developments.
You didn't vote.
I'm not gonna, I'm going right down the middle on this one. I can see both sides. That said, moving on. I guess we can get right into our reporting, brief, succinct. I guess we'll start with Shawna. Project progress to date, overall schedule, how we doing? We've heard dribs and drabs of it. Just a brief report. Kevin, are the, before we go, okay.
Blocking the camera.
Excuse me. Really?
Your enormous head got in the way.
I don't know how that could be. Are we publishing, what, I should know this, but, or Andy and Kevin, what do we?
No, we're up to date as of like a week ago, I think was a report 67.
Yeah.
They went up on.
So
They
you
were
don't-
very diligent about posting reports when they send them to them. I just got caught up, I think, Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, so the standard we're using for communication are your engineering reports, with photographs and so forth, as far as the public is concerned.
I believe so.
Yeah, Sean, you're not putting
Unless there's
anything
other
up,
stuff
and
being posted.
and Ben, you're not putting anything up on the internet, on our site.
I send our reports, our oversight reports. No. I don't think they're making it on there.
Okay.
So
Sure.
maybe for that.
Do you
All
want?
right, thanks. Shawmut, anything on progress and schedule. Any issues, anything you'd like to tell us about?
The job is going along well. We are definitely at or beating the GMP schedule at this point in time. Everything is right where we need it to be. Grade beams are completed. Backfilling of the grade beams completed. Steel is on site and started to be installed. The locker wing has been built to the point as far as we can build it, the new wing. The east wing, the big space you see there is the space we need to take out the lift steel. Most of the interior of the locker wing that is built is completed with the stalls. The roofing is on that portion. The painting is actually now on that portion, or at least one coat of it. So we've kind of built as much of the east wing as we could. Building right now, we are still anticipating 8/22 for a move back date, which is
You said 8/22?
anticipating 8/22. That may vary a little bit. We're really trying hard for it. Not because it's a specific date, it's just a date we pulled out of the air, and it kind of works with what we're doing, and it seems to be something that's going to work with our building mover at this time.
I was just going to ask you that question. Do you have to give them notice, and are they going to?
Yeah, I'm a hound. I call my subs constantly and remind them once ahead of time that it's coming up, and they stop answering their phone after a little while, after every day I call them. But they're all on board. Everybody knows what's going on. We've actually even already started keying our subs onto, the utility tie-ins are going to start once the building moves back into its location. We can start with those utility tie-ins and that stuff. So everything's moving along really at the pace we expected and better.
Question. I think, I'm sure someone in this room knows the answer. I don't. Wolf, the moving company. Did we have to pay them everything up front, or do you know how that broke down?
No, they broke everything down there on the schedule of values.
Roughly 50% of their contract's been paid out to them.
And they
About
have
50.
line items for moving the building to the parking lot, a line item for moving it back.
Okay.
Their engineer comes to the site and inspects the building?
Yeah, we've really been paying attention to the inspections on this project. The town is notified in advance. They've been really good about getting out. We had them out almost every single day when we were doing the grade beams. Actually, I think it was every day. The weather allowed us not to miss any time doing the grade beams. They're doing their inspections. STL Special Testing is doing the inspections for the concrete. Kevin has had himself or his team out doing inspections. And we've also gone as far as the east wing, even though it's partial, we've done the inspections that we're required to do, the sheathing nailing and the plumbing inspection is now done, all the underground inspections are done. So it's very well inspected, that's for sure. And we haven't missed an inspection to date. Everything is really right on target.
Yes.
I have a question about inspections. I'm not sure if it's the same kind you're speaking to or something else, but we discussed this several times, that someone was going to go through this building, or a group of people, to determine whether the systems were working properly, the electrical wiring, the stuff that you couldn't see, latent defects, stresses that you can't see, in terms of the condition of the building that's been sitting there for all these years. So has that been done?
Well, structurally, I know Kevin's looked at it, I don't want to speak for you, but structurally, I think it's the only thing we can say right now that we've really put our eyes on. Visually, we've looked at the systems, but we really can't test the plumbing system per se of the parts we're not touching. Electrical systems, sprinkler systems, and any of the gas lines. Those are all items that we really kind of can't do anything until the building's been moved back, set, we're not moving it anymore. It would almost be defeatist if we tested them now and then all of a sudden we're moving the building 150 feet.
So that's later.
So none of that stuff's been checked. Sort of in the schedule, our intent is once the building gets set back by on 8/22, like on 9/9, everything's going to be in, shim, leveled, secured. At that time, we start bringing the utilities in, we start really digging into the west wing, and then everything gets built to meet it from the east side. So it wouldn't be advantageous to do any of the testing on that now, because we're still in a moving process.
Is there any line items in the budget concerning a certain amount that's been set aside to address those issues that may occur, or are we talking strictly contingency?
I believe we
There are many allowances put aside. There are allowances in mechanicals, there are allowances for a lot of the framing.
I'm talking about the stuff you can't see. That
That's
may-
what the allowances were for.
Yeah.
We had this debate
Yeah.
and asked the engineers to go in and inspect as best they could,
Okay.
set up an allowance to try to cover some of this risk. I
So
don't
that-
know.
So that's
There
been,
there are several trades where there are line item allowances, and I want to say like electrical,
Well, in total,
Possibly
about
plumbing.
10 different packages have allowances that total up to $70,000, spread out through, for $69,000, spread out through many different things. Framing, mechanicals, electrical, plumbing, site work. So there's many allowances that add up to about 70 grand. I
So-
think roughly 10
It is-
different trade packages.
But as far as like the integrity of the building, structure, whether we were actually able to push it back into the original shape, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, but it's level again. The floors are level. I mean, they're not perfect. They still need some fine tuning, but they're level. The walls are plumb. The stresses that were built up in the structure have reversed themselves because that distortion has been erased. So, I mean, quite frankly, the building is in much better condition now than it was when I was just sitting there.
so it's possible if there's minimal items that are determined, there could be $50,000 to $70,000 back in the budget.
I wouldn't,
It's possible.
under these circumstances, I'd be a little cautious about that, because have you taken some sheetrock off?
Yes.
And is it worse or better than anybody? Well, you weren't here when we were discussing this, but, I mean, walking through the building and the trades walking through the building, does it look better or worse than anybody thought? You were there in the beginning, Ryan.
I don't think it looks any worse. I think it looks much
Honestly,
better.
I think it's on
level.
par with
Right,
what you could see before construction started.
right.
Like, for example, around the gathering room, all the beadboard was pulled off the
Right.
lower 4 feet of the walls. And, you know, there's a concern about all the wiring that was
Yeah.
stretched out. All the wiring's been rewired already.
Right.
There are no structural conditions there. All the walls were put back in contact with the floor when the floors were lifted and leveled.
Right.
The most remarkable thing to me is that the tile floor came back into level without any
Wow.
distress or cracking in it, which is a testament to the stuff they put under the tiles.
Underneath it, yeah.
T-shirt
The mesh, yeah.
By stocking.
Yeah.
And Jerry Lombardo was able to find some extra tiles so we can just patch the floor.
Okay, good. Any, continue, if you will. Anything else you want us to know?
No, I'll come by, take a look, it's...
Yeah, I think I would advise the committee, some of those photographs are remarkable. That when you look at the grade beams, the amount of concrete that's out there, the foundation is massive, and it won't float away. That leads me to a question. When the building is rolled back or moved back, how long does it sit unattached to those grade beams? Do you start right away attaching it, and how is it attached? Is it bolted down to the grade beams?
I mean, there are different ways depending on what part of the building you're under, how it gets attached. Steel columns get anchored down into the grade beams with screw bolts. Wood posts have post bases that get screwed down also with screw bolts. The tops of the columns are attached to the beams, so it's all kind of interconnected.
Because we're right in the open window for hurricane season. So, and the most vulnerable time, I would think, would be the building just lowered there and in the process of being attached. You know, I mean, once it's attached to that concrete, it's not going anywhere, but, so is that a prolonged period of time, or is it?
No, the schedule I have, and I've kind of vetted this out with the subs. I'm trying to give them as much time as they need, but at the same time push them so we can, you know, have some extra time if we have it. So the building gets, again, 8/22, that's our date. that we're shooting for. And by 9/9, I believe we have all the lift steel out. So there's a couple of week window there where it's going to allow us to bring the building into position. The building movers will lower it down and get it very close to the height we need. And at that point, the individual trades, the general trades for the wood beams and the steel trade will come in with some jacks, and they'll literally fine tune it. We'll have a laser set, and they'll fine tune the bottom of the building and get each of those legs, because they sit anywhere from an inch to approximately 2.5 inches off of the concrete. Those get shimmed, they get secured, and then they get grouted. So that's probably, considering it's a tight space to work, we're leaving about a 2 to 3 week window for that work. So it's about 2 weeks, maybe a little more, that the building is just kind of hovering there, but it's very close to where it has to be, so.
Okay, any questions from the committee as far as the project is concerned?
I don't.
Any other issues, any risks that you see that we're unaware of?
No, for any procurement items, all set?
Well, I imagine the project is totally bought out, right?
Risks are really going to be firing up all the MEP systems and making sure all mechanicals will be working, and then obviously moving the building back and setting out foundations.
UI, have we gotten our letter from the Vatican, which allows the UI to appear?
I have printed many, many copies of the email that says, yes, you're good to go.
Okay.
I'm going to frame a few.
Okay. That said, Ben, anything for us this morning?
Most of the
this
stuff in
afternoon?
here is covered by Sean, so we don't have any objections to what they said, so this will just give a little bit of a financial update.
I'm going to ask the obvious question while you're distributing.
Sure.
I think I saw this published on the internet.
I emailed it to you earlier today.
Okay, but what we were hoping for is to get this a couple of days before the meeting so that we'd have an opportunity to digest it.
No, that's gonna be, I'll make that comment later when we talk about approving some bills tonight.
Okay, so in the future, all right, do you want to just, as we're thumbing through this, do you want to just take us through it?
Sure. Let's look at this here. So we agree with Sean that things on site look to be on schedule, and in fact, a little bit ahead of schedule. The only risk to the schedule at the moment that we can see would be the parking lot if it does change from the GMP scope. Over that. Construction progress, everything that I have here is what Jeff went over with you earlier, same with the inspections. We've been keeping up with Sean on Town of Fairfield, building department inspections, checking the definition. Quality seems to not be an issue. It seems like everything is getting built the way that we all expected that it was purchased. The only unresolved issues or exposures really at this time are the parking lot and the firing up of the MEP system in this building as well. Already discussed. Budget summary to date, which I have our basic accounting ledger on the back of this. So total project budget, that includes the GMP and all of the rest of the soft costs. To date, we have paid approximately 31% of our total project budget, which is a very good standing at the moment. We're trending below budget as of now. The GMP budget to date, not including what's presented tonight, you have the figures there, and we have paid approximately 28% of the GMP to date. And the owner contingency that is remaining as of today is, not including anything that we go over tonight, is $278,500. All of this is highlighted in the back of this package. Change order summary, we have a few pending change orders and budget transfers that we'll go over later tonight. With that, you'll see all of the change orders that the budget transfers that the committee has approved to date. And then the application for payment, we will review with that tonight.
I thought that I thought the change order one had a offset of savings. Where's the change order that deals with the elimination of the riprap in front of the bulkhead? It ended up being like a $15,000 net. What am I missing?
That's in ASI too, which we have the CCD for, which we're still.
So we have a not to exceed CC, construction change directive of not to exceed 15,000.
Where does that appear here?
So that actually we don't have in there because it's a CCD at the moment. We're waiting for final pricing to be finalized from Shawmut's end and then for us to go.
But it's a
through.
construction change directives. It's a commitment
It's a
by
commitment
this
to do
committee
work.
that's
Yeah.
not showing up here?
I can show it up here, it's just not an actual change order.
But if we're sitting here talking about what we're spending and where we are in the budget, you've got an outstanding CCD that has a value of about $15,000, which would impact
So this list that you have.
the owner's budget
So
or
this
contingency?
list- So this, the $15,000 actually accounted for. If you go to the end of this report into the accounting ledgers, we actually have that 15,000, the full 15,000 accounted for as an exposure and as a draw from the construction contingency, owner's contingency, excuse me, at the moment. So when that 278.5 number that we talked about, that not only is reflective of the change orders that have been approved to date, but it's also reflective of any pending change orders that are not approved yet and any exposures that.
Okay, if you're going to talk to us about owner's contingency in the future, I think that this ought to be developed a little bit further, because most of us are, especially when we're sitting here looking at it during a meeting, are not going to go back and wade through the detail, and maybe not even be able to totally be fluent in the details. So maybe the written narrative could just be developed a little bit further so that we can look at total risk. I mean, we had a discussion earlier in this meeting about what money is going to be left and, impacting our decision-making.
Can I make additional suggestion?
Yes.
It would seem to me that this information should come to our subcommittee well in advance of the meeting so that Steve, Rich, and I can dialogue this thing. Because again, you're right, these numbers on here, I'm trying to visualize in my head how to reconcile them. So I have no problem putting them here, but I think the subcommittee should get them in advance, so it's up to you, to the chairman's point. And I'm just not sure 278 is the right number. You're probably right, but I got...
So the couple of meetings that we've had, Howard has had with the finance subcommittee, those Excel spreadsheets that we've been sending and that Steve has been having us meet about, those are actually what I presented here as well.
I see.
So the conference calls that we have had as a group, the last one we had was last week, that number hasn't changed because nothing's been approved since.
That was the last number that we talked about?
278.5.
Okay, fair
That,
enough.
like I said, is not only the items that have been approved,
Right.
but it's also every exposure that we have potentially out there. So that 278.5 actually is a conservative number.
And that and the only way we'd be able to identify those exposures that you have in the 278,500 is to go back to your backup
Yeah, so the last 2 pages is what we.
contingency status report.
Yeah, that shows you what has been approved for change orders, what, everything in gray has been rejected, either it was a potential exposure that we identified and then it vetted itself out that it wouldn't be, and then down at the bottom, everything that you see there in white are actually all the current exposures that we have, whether they're a pending change order or whether we have just, or Stefano and Jim have picked it up on site and it may be coming down the pipeline.
Okay. So, in summary, your construction progress summary is consistent with Shawmut's report. The inspections are taking place. We've been through that. You make a representation here about the quality. You've looked at unresolved major issues and expenditures. We have a budget summary and a change order summary.
Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Yes.
On the general site, the bulkhead and revetment removed, this week, is the full thing, at the last meeting, was my understanding, only partially had been removed, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
The rest of it's been taken off?
Yes.
Okay. And have we resolved, there's nothing in it's going to go in its place?
Nothing except the possibility of a grass or a planted barrier of some kind.
I did ask Joe earlier today, so it is in either his court or the flood and erosion control board to pursue if they want to plant something behind the building. He understands that it's not the committee's purview.
And it was
As you
my-
guys expressed last week.
And my understanding that whatever we do is not going to be good enough, and we had to go to additional costs of putting those cross beams in as a result of having it taken out. Am I correct?
That's proceeding. That's part of that CCD one that had the $50,000 to exceed.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? You would get probably a lot of questions if we'd gotten this a couple of days earlier, so if you'd do that next time, that'd be great. And publicly, thank you for your efforts. We see each other every once in a while at project meetings, 8 o'clock every Tuesday morning, and I think Colliers is doing a good job representing this committee. Anything else? Any questions? Kevin, anything on design issues, design and engineering, outstanding issues?
Nothing I would say is outstanding. So last month, we approved the ASI number 2, which is all the data generated by the bulkhead coming out. One thing that we didn't make it in there is we had a lot of extra lighting on the back of the building facing the beach that was going to light the bulkhead and the stairs over the bulkhead. We've since gotten together with the electrical engineer, went over the plans, took a lot of that out that wasn't necessary, in conjunction with reviewing it with Jerry Lombardo, just to make sure the lighting was meeting the program needs. So we made a bunch of changes, mostly deleting light fixtures, but then we did add some dimming that he requested. It's winding up being a net credit of about $4,500. So that's one design issue. As you mentioned, we worked out the requirements from UI for the transformer placement, which are a little more detailed now than they were when we talked to them before construction started. But we got everything to work. There probably will be some additional costs for railing they've asked for around the transformer, and some additional asphalt in the area so we can fit their crane truck.
Can the railing have some aesthetic touch to it? Does it have to be 2-inch pipe painted yellow so that it looks like the backside of a power plant?
I was thinking of some posts with chains in between, or even the wooden posts with the rope in between, like you have along Fairfield Beach Road, might look nice.
Will they
Honestly,
accept-
it's really just for the day they deliver the transformer, but they require us to, make it safe for their workers.
So sockets, and as soon as they leave, we pull the posts out? Okay. I guess that won't work, at least not now. Anything else? Ben, anything on your offline issues? In other words, not necessarily in the report, something we need to know about?
No, I think everything that he feels important is in there.
Okay.
Apologies, my allergies are really brutal. I'm gonna go.
Make it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's just my allergies.
Anybody know the Heimlich?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thank you. Sorry.
The
Okay.
finance, anything for approval tonight?
Well, again, Ben, how do you want to deal with this? Ben sent a package to us on Monday morning. There's been a whole series, I'm sure, of questions, and looking now, the last email was about noon today, in which there's 3 open questions. So how do you want to handle it? Do you want to resolve those 3 open questions? Do you want to back off in submitting
We can
them?
at least attempt to do that. I can, just so everybody has a reference of the invoices on the table tonight. I didn't want to print the whole package because it's 117 pages. So if anybody has any questions, specific questions, you can open up that binder that has the entire 117-page document.
October 31st. Just his resignation, or his intent to resign tonight. Just like within a week or so. He must have a process.
All right, so
In theory.
first one on the list is Stefano and Chamberlain.
I wonder if he implemented
This has been
this.
consistent with their
I was
monthly
thinking
billing.
that, actually.
This is based on construction phase.
I don't know if
and
he was against the
based on
softball field while he was
a
working
10 to
there.
12 month construction period of construction administration. So I don't know, Jim, if you guys wanted to vote as the...
No, I think the question is, with the, if we do this and we're consistent, you present this document, you read us what you want us to have action on, we ask our finance subcommittee whether there are any problems or objections, and we vote. The committee has not voted them all out as a group, we've been doing it individually, which I think is probably appropriate, it's not that big a deal. So that said, if there's no objection to Stefano and Chamberlain's invoice,
Well, okay, if we're just voting on item number 5614,
yes,
okay, the committee has no objections.
all right. There's been a motion made,
I made,
seconded.
I'll second that.
Okay, can you taking this down? That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd rather take it down.
This is invoice 5614, the amount of $10,910. All in favor? Aye. Against? Unanimous? Abstentions? Colliers International, invoice 16169. Present that for them since it's their invoice. Any problems with that?
no objection to 16169.
Motion made? Seconded. All in favor of the, invoice approval and payment of invoice 1669 in the amount of $6,380.28. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstained? Thank you. The next one is the Town of Fairfield. Ben, you want to explain that
Sure,
to us?
this is invoice number 4.
Ben, you're going to address Richard's comment about the fee? Is that buried in this invoice?
That's later on, yeah.
Later on? Okay, fair enough.
But 42102, Richard did have a question about this as well. This is an invoice that was sent to us from the town purchasing department. This is a permit fee. They have a state education fee. I believe it's based on a percentage of the entire permit cost, and it's in the amount of $1,859. As of now, it's the permit for this job as of now at $1,859 is unpaid.
Is this consistent throughout, and even though it's a public project, this additional permit applies, fee applies?
It is. I actually double checked with building today. It's a state standard, so it's a fee that's on all building permits. It's based on roughly like 26 cents per $1,000 of the job. So the town's able to waive the permit fees for the town, but we in turn have to pay that fee to the state. And it goes to like a reimbursement continuing education program that the state holds for like anyone in the construction field.
Okay.
So it's not anything that we can get at.
That said, I'd entertain a motion to pay invoice number 42102.
Before we make that motion, could I ask a question? Was that fee contemplated in the original proposal?
No.
When we approved, so this thing is, the cost of this fee is just going to be something in addition, am I correct?
Right.
It's in this invoice, but it was not in the original thing that we approved.
Right.
Correct.
Do we take, I'm sorry, I have one
Yeah.
question. Do we anticipate that there'll be future instances where we will have to pay into the state education budget as permits come through, or is this the one and only one we have to worry about?
No, this should be the only one, because it's the permit that Shawmut took for the project. So that it encompasses all the trades.
I just want to make sure that I understood you. This is the one and only time that we're going to, again, I'm not being a wise guy.
Yes.
This is the one and only time that we're going to have to pay something in the budget through a building permit.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
then, you made the motion?
No, I didn't, but you'll...
Oh, I thought you did. Then I'll make the motion to approve.
Andy seconded.
Yeah,
Motion made and
I'll
seconded
second
to
it.
pay the Town of Fairfield invoice 42102 in the amount of $1,859. All in favor? Against? Thank you. Abstentions? Next one is Special Testing Laboratories. Do you want to take us quickly through that?
Yeah, I know we voted on it, I just want to ask, clarify. This is, the Town of Fairfield, that permit charge is noted as an invoice. It's included on your summary as an exposure on the contingency side.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why this sort of formatting you included in the upper section and
It's
instead of the
not
lower
really a
section?
change order, and it's not a budget transfer, it truly is an invoice as it came to us, and Chuck and I went back and forth on this. So, I mean, we could break out a third section, I suppose, for soft cost invoices, but ultimately, there's not a line item in the budget, so it naturally has to come from the owner's contingency, the only way we can account for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I wanted to get your input on
We don't
why
have-
that was there.
So it's right out of contingency.
Yeah, it comes out of contingency.
Okay, Special Testing Laboratories.
Invoice 30260, this is an invoice that came, this is special test, it's material testing, so all of the grade beam work that took place over the last month, special testing was out there every day. We actually checked their invoice against the reports that we've been seeing, and also against Jeff Wheeler from Shaw's sign-in sheet, and it jived with us, so that's why we have it out here.
So
Ben,
you're-
did you see the email that Steve sent you questioning about the insurance?
That is for the,
Is that in this invoice?
it's in for the, it's under the change request.
Okay, I want to make sure we discuss it in the right context. Okay, fair enough.
Special Testing Laboratories invoice, motion made and seconded. Made and seconded. This is a payment of invoice 30260 in the amount of $1,731.75. All in favor? Against? Abstained? Thank you. The next invoice presented to us is Shawmut Woodworking and Supply. You want to take us into that, through that?
Okay.
Ben?
Yeah, this is
Dave?
pay application number 9 in the amount of $741,691.49. This was because of the size and because of the amount of paperwork, which is Wilson full-set binder. This was heavily vetted. There were many rounds of revisions. It's been back and forth with the finance subcommittee as well. At this point, DeStefano and Chamberlain, Colliers, feel pretty comfortable with moving forward with the amount that's here. We based everything off of schedule of values with the subcontractors and their fee and general liability insurance. And this specific pay application is consistent with the progress of construction.
Just one point of order, is that the June or
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, obviously, if there's any discussion, I think it's certainly from that endorsement, it should be on the table as a motion, and if there's any discussion, we can, all right with you? Motion,
I'll make the motion.
made and seconded. This is invoice, Shawmut, invoice number 9, in the amount of $741,691.49, all in, on the table. Motion made and seconded.
Kevin, did I
Discussion?
hear your comment? Is the date incorrect on this, Ben?
Yeah, it is. It actually is. The invoice number is correct, the date is wrong, so I'll
Which-
amend that.
Do you know what it should be, or?
Yeah, it's 6:30.
Okay, thank you.
Would you consider this invoice current? I mean, current in timing, behind, about right?
It's up to June 30th. We based our reconciliation off of June 30th progress.
Okay. I mean, typically, yeah, you'd want to be voting on it like the second week of the month, but everybody understood that this was a special exception.
Okay. That's it. Any other discussion? The vote is, the motion has been made and seconded for invoice number 9 in the amount of $741,691.49. All in favor? Against? Abstained? Passed? Okay, that takes, this is your document, Ben, this takes us to budget transfers and change requests. What do you want?
These are the current pending change requests. According to
I think you should have this in front of you when you're going through this thing, because this spells out what they are,
Okay.
okay? In case
We'll
anyone has...
we'll also have Kevin elaborate, because some of this, particularly change request number 3, the one we're going to talk about right now, I'll have Kevin elaborate on the mechanics of it, but What Steve Pitnello brought up, specific to change requests, not budget transfers, but change requests, which are the next two, is Shawmut is assessing their CM fee per their contract on any additional change orders. So when we have a change order that comes in, they'll apply their 2% fee onto it, and that's per their contract. They're also assessing a general liability fee of 1% on any change order amount, which is documented in the A133 contract, AA document, that they are carrying a 1.08% general liability insurance premium on any contract value. Because a change order changes the contract value per se. That's the reason why they're billing it. Steve Pitnell had a question wondering why they're adding general liability fee onto their change request, and that is the reason why. On some projects, it's assessed at the end of the project, so if you have X amount of dollars in change orders, then we'll just close it out at a 1% fee. Shawmut has chosen to do it per change order, which per the contract, we don't see an issue with it. They're not violating any parts of the contract, but Steve Pitnell, that was his question.
Well, I can only tell you that Steve's, and his email to me today says he has some concern about this, as to why this insurance is being added at this point in time. Now, again, I would defer to Steve, who does this for a living, and if he has some question, you seem to indicate this is pretty standard. So I don't know, we have to resolve it, and I'm not in a position to resolve it unless someone can explain to me who's right.
Well, also on change orders that are credit, you also get credited back the GL fee as well. So if it's an add to the project, we add GL. If you get credited back the same percentage.
Shawmut or Ben, the real issue here is under overpayment. So is it the contract, or does all of this include a reconciliation at closeout?
Yes, it does.
So if we've overpaid, we get money back. If we've underpaid, we might get charged more. This is just taking it as it goes. But there is a reconciliation at the end, which is more typical.
There could be, yes, but we adjust our GL with the adjustment of the contract value.
Okay, so we expect that every time there's a change order, it's going to be that it's just going to go up and down, and at the end, we'll sit down and find out. Okay, also in the timing of the dates, the change order 3, if we're back again, unless these dates are wrong, 3 was in May and 4 was in July.
Yeah, I don't know why this didn't draft right. I changed all of these dates, but from line item that we talked about with their pay application, it's simply just an Excel error. I don't know why.
Okay, let's move this. Is there any material objection to approving this? And we can certainly get into Steve's concerns.
Kevin, do you want to talk about what change order?
Well, I think Steve's game's been allayed, based upon the saying is every time there's a change order, they add or subtract.
Right.
Because Steve wants to know why we're changing it at all. But I think that Steve's answer, you've given me Steve's answer, and I will communicate that to him. So I don't think it's an open issue for the committee.
Kevin, you had something to say?
Yeah, I could just explain what these are for, if you'd like.
I thought we had-
Ben has written it up. but-
Yeah, we got it in the write-up. Does anybody?
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Okay. We got it.
Okay.
Thank you, unless you think there's something we need to know, other than what's written here in
Well,
the...
number 3 basically is we have 2 water pipes coming up below the building in freezing,
What conditions?
conditions. One of them, we owned a heat trace line and insulation around it. The second one, there was some question whether it was called out to add insulation and heat trace. But the majority of this change order isn't for that. It's a little bit for heat tracing, but most of it is to interconnect a sensor on the sprinkler main coming up under the building to the fire alarm panel, so that if that pipe starts to freeze, it sends a signal to the fire alarm panel, alerting the monitoring service.
Okay.
So it's a good thing, it's an added benefit. I recommend we do it. There is a cost for it, but I think it's in the interest of the town to have it.
Well, the reason I raised the issue, again, it's a lot easier when you ask to add $4,400 and take 46 out on the next line. It becomes a lot easier to deal with things. When you just look at the positive without the negative, it's difficult. So I'm questioning again the timing of these things. These were done at 2 different times. They just happened to be one raises it, and a couple 2 months later we're going to lower it.
Yeah, I mean, We try not to intermingle completely unrelated things in the same change order, because like.
I trust you.
It should be tracked separately.
Okay. And this lighting on 4, that's not going to have any negative impact in terms of the safety issues and something like that?
No, because what we're trying to light isn't there anymore.
Okay.
That's it. If you're, we can handle these both at the same
Yeah,
time.
no problem.
All right, a motion made and seconded for approval of change order 3 and 4.
3 and 4, yeah.
Made by me.
Seconded by me.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against, abstain? So change orders 3 and 4. Change order 3 was in the amount of $4,481, and change order 4 is a credit of $4,549. So it's pretty much a wash. That takes us to budget transfer 05 and 06.
Yeah, so budget transfers, they are drawn from construction contingency, not from owner's contingency. Budget transfer number 5 is, Shawmut did some environmental testing prior to the project. It's part of their protocol, and there are some loosely laid requirements in the spec for the owner to provide this information. So they had ATC, environmental, come in and do asbestos, the PCB, and all types of environmental hazard testing, so that they know that when they send their workers into the building, they're not sending them into a situation that could be hazardous. So we do have a report. We have a full report from ATC that Kevin has seen as well, that we filed with the town documents. That was in the amount of $1,170, and we do have an invoice backup from ATC, which is in the binder up there. And then number 6.
Can we just do one at a time? Because 6 has a problem. I would like to propose that we accept budget change number 005.
Made and seconded.
I'll go second. Can I have it? The hazmat testing, that's standard practice for Shawmut. Why wouldn't that be included in the base scope?
Well, essentially it is now.
Well, what our contract says is that the owner is supposed to provide us environmental reports before we start. I broached that with the town, they didn't have any reports or environmental reports, so we took it upon ourselves to be able to do the environmental testing, because we really can't start demo without it.
Yeah.
So early February, I went looking for that unsuccessfully, and we ordered our company, which was, I feel, really the price for all the testing that they did to do it, so we could keep going.
Okay. I just wanted to ask the question. I
Okay.
know
All right,
it's a
thank you.
minimal
All in
cost.
favor?
Okay.
Against, again, that was a budget transfer in the amount of $1,170. Then the next one we have on the list here is budget transfer 006 in the amount of $1,093.
I'm going to propose it, but we have some issues with it. Did you see Steve's email to you? Why he believes that 6 should be a zero-sum game? Did you see his email to you today?
I haven't, to be honest with you.
Again, I can read you the email, or we can put the furnace, because
Is it
Steve has...
more than 60 pages?
What?
What are you going to read us? A
Just read
sentence?
4 lines.
Okay, good.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, sure, I
Okay.
think we should know. I'd like to dispose of this.
Okay,
To
all
use
right.
the word.
This is in Steve's email to you today. He says, "Why is Shawmut presenting BT06? This is a back charge to Waters. Therefore, shouldn't they be requesting deduct from Waters line items and increase to Banton's for a net value of 0? How are they accounting for the Waters back charges if this BT gets approved? If this B gets approved, they should issue another amount from Banton." Basically, he's saying switch from one to the other, it should be a zero-sum game.
Well, if I may, so the reason why the conduit was damaged was because it wasn't where it was supposed to be, either on the drawings or on the call before you dig mark out. So there was no way Waters would have known they were going to hit conduit. So it's one thing if it's there and they intentionally, broke it because of negligence. I completely agree with Steve, but it was kind of an unforeseen condition.
Unforeseen that we felt that we take the responsibility for it, take it out of our construction contingency, instead of going, to the owner looking for the money.
Ben, you in agreement?
I did look at the as-bills, and it's not on the as-bill, where they hit it, it's not on the as-bills, and it wasn't marked out. So in that typical situation, normally ends up being a change order. In this particular situation, it's being presented as a construction contingency item. So my opinion, just from past experience with this very similar situations, is think it's a valid change.
It's a claim, and it's been resolved in an appropriate and valid way.
It's not being proposed from our
Well,
contingencies.
let me just say this thing, nothing is important, but if you keep adding $1,000, next thing you know, we're going to have nothing left. Again, I'm not in a position, quite frankly, to be able to evaluate what you say. I'm just addressing it from the committee. The committee's basically looking at something and seeing a change order or a transfer and wondering why, if it's coming out of one or the other. Obviously, we have to defer to you who looked at the facts and circumstances, and if you're satisfied, then I will therefore not object to the budget transfer.
Well,
On behalf of the
this is
committee.
being handled within the budget. This is not an add to the committee.
And what we did, when this came about, we had a very similar reaction to Steve Colliers did, and we went and we checked the facts. We talked to Kevin, we went out, we looked at the as-built with Chauvin, we went out and looked at where it was hit.
Then maybe I don't understand this. You believe this is a zero-sum game the way you're looking at it?
I don't know about zero-sum games. I just know that this is a appropriate, first, if it was marked out and on as-built drawings, call before you dig marked it out, it was on, and on as-built, and not located properly on the as-built drawings. They nicked this pipe and it cost $1,000 to repair it. Is that the story?
That's it.
Okay.
But, and just so you know, it wasn't just one pipe. I believe there were like 3 or 4 conduits. One of them had wire in it that had to be taken out and then snaked back in from one end to the other. So there was some work involved. And they did it immediately. This actually happened back in March, I believe.
All right.
So they did their due diligence.
And it's coming out of their contingency. Ordinarily, it could be an owner's, it could be first bucket would be the owner's cost.
Okay.
And it would be out of our contingency. But right now, it's not increasing the cost of the project.
Okay. And
That said, I would recommend it be paid. It's been kicking around and going back and forth. We've probably spent almost half of this just on paper.
I agree with Mr. Chairman that we don't want to slow it down. I'm just only saying, that 1,000 here, 1,000 there,
No,
next thing you know, it's
we're-
serious money. That's all I'm saying, and I don't, in any way, I want to stop the process.
And we're going to watch it. So, motion made?
I already made it.
Seconded.
Seconded, yeah.
Well, the invoice number is the transfer is 006 in the amount of $1,093. All in favor? Against? In the future, then somebody ought to look at these dates.
Yeah.
The other thing would be great to have somebody initial this from your office. I see that Chuck's name's here, and it'd be dated. End of report. End of report. Public comment? Old business? New business? You have enough note-taking
I got enough to be dangerous.
for the first round? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned, made, seconded, thank you.
It's like $10.
I'm kind of thinking that.
Second meeting, did a great job.
And I think it's a testament to the fact that you guys voted it out first time. But I'm bringing it up to get the whole area.
I think that's what's gonna happen, it's gonna be too late.
I mean, I don't get it.
That's why I wanted to delay the vote, and so we're at the end, let's do it again.
Right.
Who cares if it's September, October, November?
I understand the point